How to use Netlabs and NetSpace together to get your work completed promptly and accurately. When you're within NetSpace and we go to Modules, here you will see the different modules that you have assigned. And you see the chapter, the PowerPoint, you see the packet tracers that are assigned for each module. You should see the PKA file for the packet tracer. That's the executable file. Then you see the docx. Those are your instructions. That's where you answer the questions. You will save the file with the file name given and add your name to that file name so that you get credit for your work. And then you will upload both the packet tracer that includes your file name and the Word doc that includes your file name. When we get into the labs, you will notice once you get into Chapter 2 that some of the labs state that it is the packet tracer file or the Netlabs file. You'll see that here and you see that here. If it says packet tracer, complete that lab using packet tracer program. If it says Netlabs, you will go to that site to complete your lab. Then you will upload the Word doc at this location where it says upload with your answers typed in. An example here is lab 2.3.3.4. It says lab, building a simple network. This is to be completed in Netlabs. So we will open the Netlabs site. I have already completed the port test, and this must be done each time you log in to Netlabs. So I need to schedule my lab. I'm going to schedule it for myself. I want to schedule 2.3.3.4. It says that I'm going to start now. Always put your lab time 4 hours out from where you're beginning. This will allow you ample time to complete the lab. Say OK. I'm done. Then you will enter the lab. And at this time your equipment pod is going to load. And this may take several minutes to complete. Once the equipment has come on, you'll notice that it now says that it is initializing. You'll see that here. What that is doing is it's bringing the actual equipment that is on site at the college up. It is turning everything on. You can see that under Connections. You'll see here are the devices. It says it's in System Process. I can go to Status and you will see that it is booting the device. Under Topology, I can bring up Show Lab. That will bring up the PDF of that lab, and this PDF should match the Word doc that you have. In this particular lab, it tells us that we're going to identify the cables and ports for use in the network, cable the physical lab topology. When you are doing these labs in Netlabs, you cannot actually physically connect cables. This can only be done physically in the lab. And you are more than welcome to come to campus during our open lab times to complete this. We have some background information. Tells us that we're going to use 2 switches and 2 PCs. We're going to have console cables to console in, and our Ethernet cables also need to be connected. This is if you were connecting it in the Live Lab. I'm going to show you both a Live Lab example of this lab and the Netlabs version of this lab. For the Netlabs version, we're going to continue on down through the instructions, and we will begin at part 2, step 1. We will omit part 3, step 1. In the Netlabs environment, you'll click on the device that you're needing to configure. You do not go through the PCs to configure the devices. You notice now that it tells me that I can begin my lab. I no longer have initializing here. It is now counting down the time that it took to initialize. That is part of your 4 hours. That's one of the reasons why I suggest you use 4 hours, is you have time for the system to come up. You also have time at the end of your lab for the system to shut down properly. In this lab, in part 2, we need to set up our PCs. And we're going to do this, we're going to go in and we're going to configure the PC so that it is set up for IPv4 and that we give it an IP address and a subnet mask. This is necessary for the computers to be networked together properly. So on this one, I'm going to switch back over to my Netlabs and I'm going to go into PCA. So here I see PCA. So I'm going to click on PCA to open PCA. You will have to run the simulation. It will have to go out there and open Java yet again. We'll run it. And you'll notice that we now have the desktop for PCA. You should see all the information that you need located here. Take time to look around. Get familiar with the PC itself. You can change your view. If you don't like seeing the rest of the Netlab behind you, you can change that view. There's several different ways that we can go in and change the IP address. One of the easiest ways to do this, and the most efficient way when you're on campus, as you'll notice here in the lower right hand corner, we have a connection here that's got the triangle saying that there's a problem. I'm going to click here, and it says currently connected, and it says it's unidentified network. I can also open Network and Sharing Center. I'm going to open the Network and Sharing Center. Here is the lab in the PC that I'm working on. I'm going to click Local Area Connection. I'm going to go to Properties. I need to set up IPv4. That is this one here. I will select it, go into Properties, and you notice that there is no IP address set up. From here, I'm going to click Use the following IP address because I'm going to assign it an IP address. My instructions tell me that I'm going to use 192.168.1.10 as PCA's IP address. So within here, I will key in 192.168.1.10. And then I will click OK. then click Close. Click Close again. Once you've completed this task, your instructions tell you to verify that you've set this IP address up correctly. And we will do that by dropping out to the command prompt from PCA and looking for the information. So in order to do that, you're going to come to the start. You're going to type in CMD, which takes you to the command prompt, and hit enter. From here, I'm going to type in IPCONFIG/all. This is the IP config of this particular device. If I scroll through here and look, this tells me that the IP address is 192.168.1.10. So I have it set up correctly. The next instructions tell us to console into the switch. We will not be consoling into the switch inside of Netlabs. We'll go back to our topology, and for switch 1, I'm simply going to enter into that switch. Again, you'll have to run the simulation in order for it to open up the switch itself. Now I have switch 1 open. We have each of the switches set up with a different color just to make your life easier when you're trying to configure the devices. You'll remember which switch you are on. At this point, I'm going to hit enter, and you'll see that it just says switch. Nothing has been configured yet. So I'm at the privileged exec mode, and it has certain commands that allow you to work in from the user exec mode to get into privileged exec. I need to be able to configure my device. So from this point, I'm going to enter privileged exec mode by telling it enable here at the user exec mode. So at this location, I'm at user exec, and I want in privileged exec. So I'm going to type in enable and hit enter. If you cannot remember your commands, you can type in the first few letters, hit tab, and it will complete the command for you. This is one way if you're having trouble remembering what to key in. You can do that this way. Another thing that you can key in is the question mark, and it will come up with the commands that you can use at that particular mode. So I'm going to go back into privileged exec mode, and you'll see when I do the question mark here, it brings up another list of commands that I can use. When you notice that it has more at the bottom of your screen, if you hit your space bar, it will scroll up one page at a time. If you want to go only one line at a time, you will hit your down arrow key. So from here, my next set of instructions tells me that I need to configure my terminal. And we simply type in configure terminal, or you can key in config T. That is one of your shortcuts. From here, I'm going to give it a host name. It makes it easier to keep up with which switch you're working on if you have named the switch. So from here, I'm going to type in config T or config terminal, and I'm going to type in host name, and I'm going to call this one S1 for switch 1. And when I hit enter, you'll notice that it no longer says switch config, but it says S1 config. I'm going to go ahead and close out this switch. I'm not going to complete this lab for you, but I did want to show you how to get into it in Netlabs. When you have completed your lab successfully, you've gone through all the steps, you need to click I'm done. It says, do you want to end the reservation right now? We're going to say OK. It says that your reservation has been completed. I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice I did not close down PCA, so I need to come in here and tell it, yeah, I want to close it down. No, I don't want to try to reestablish a connection. Try to make sure that you close out those connections. I know it's easy to forget that you left them open. From here, you'll notice that I no longer have a reservation showing. If you see your reservation is still showing after you've told it I'm done, do not click on that reservation's number and click cancel reservation. When you do that, it deletes the work you have done from the system, and there is no way for me to verify that you actually attempted the lab or even completed the lab. So try not to do that because you will lose your work from doing that. Okay, just one moment, and I'm going to show you how to complete this lab also using PuTTY, which is our console emulator that we use within the Live Lab. To complete this lab in a Live Lab, we will have our document pulled up, and we will use our topology that is shown here. From this topology, I know that I'm going to need one console cable or crossover cable. I'm going to need 1, 2, 3 Ethernet cables to make my connections. And the one thing it doesn't show on here, I will also need a power here, and I need power to this switch as well. So we will get those cables together and connect the network. Once we have completed this task, we will bring up the program in the lab called PuTTY, and it is located on the different machines within the Live Lab. What you're going to need to complete this lab is you're going to need a power cord. You will need 3 Ethernet cables, and you will need 1 crossover or console cable. I'm going to connect 1 console cable to the back of this switch. I will also connect it to the back of the PC that I'm working on. You'll need to connect the power to both of the switches. The reason why I didn't connect 2 console cables is I'm going to change the connection between the 2 switches and only use 1 console or 1 PC as I work to configure the devices. According to the topology, PCA is plugged into the fast Ethernet port FA06 of switch 1. We're going to use this as switch 1. And FA06, we have odd and even numbers. This says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our port is this one. You'll notice that I have an orange light flashing. And then it tells me that switch 2 is plugged into FA018. So with that Ethernet cable, I'll plug it into FA018. And that one will also flash orange.
From the topology, it tells me that switch 1 and switch 2 are connected through the fast Ethernet ports 0, 1. So I will connect FA01 on switch 1 to FA01 on switch 2. And you'll notice that I have orange lights flashing as it's trying to make the connection there as well. From here, you will use PuTTY as your console emulator in order to get into the switches and control them.
Now that you have your topology wired, you need to go into PuTTY. PuTTY will be located on the computers within the lab. You will either see it here on the taskbar, or it will be on the main desktop, and it's called PuTTY. And this is the software that we will use. Once you open it up, you're going to change to a serial port, COM1, speed 9600. I'm going to click serial here. I need to make sure that the parity is none and the flow control is none. Once I do that, I will click open. Once you've done this, your screen will show up black. Just hit enter, and then it will show you the commands that it's getting started. It says, would you like to enter the initial configuration dialog? We're going to say no and hit enter. And now you'll notice that we have switch, just like we did in Netlabs. I can type enable. This changes me to privileged exec mode. I can do config T. I can change my host name. Type exit, and I can do show run. That's going to show my running configs, how my switch is already set up. Again, if it says more, I can click my space bar to go up a page at a time, or I can show my startup config. And it says that there is not one present. As you key in your commands to configure your switch, your running config will be established. When you've completed setting up your running config, and it also doesn't hurt to do it periodically as you're working, you will type in copy, run, start, or copy running-config startup config, and that copies your running config to your startup config. Just hit enter. That way you don't mistype startup config. And now we can show our start, and we now have a configuration because we copied our running config over our startup config. If you had not done this, it's easy to lose the startup config and your running config. Let's say you should have a fluctuation in your power, so you want to take time to copy your running config to your startup config. To close out PuTTY, you simply click the X in the upper right hand corner. It says, do you want to close this session? I'm going to say yes. And it takes you back to whatever you had opened at that particular time. I hope this helps you understand how to use our live labs. Again, I will be posting our live lab schedule inside of NetSpace for you to see in case you want to come in and work in a live lab. You're also welcome to come and work in a live lab during my Monday night Net 225 course. I have several computers and router switching stacks that are available to you to use during that class time.